Husband's been secretly taking trips abroad to meet a woman he's been talking to for months, and I don't mean a once-off layover flirtation but a passport that suddenly looks like it joined a book club without me. Hi, I'm Lila, 34, a forensic accountant who stares at numbers all day until they confess why they're lying, and yes, the joke's on me because somehow the one ledger I didn't audit was my marriage. The first clue wasn't lipstick or a love note, it was a suitcase that got too good at packing itself. Would be doing nothing, watching that baking show where everyone whispers sponge like it's a prayer, and he'd say, quick client meeting in Singapore, or 2 days in Lisbon back before you miss me, and the suitcase would hum like a pet that knew its name. I wanted to be the cool wife who can say bon voyage without blinking. I wanted to be the woman who understands that other people's jobs have other people's time zones. Instead, I became the woman who knows the smell of jet fuel through a shirt that was allegedly worn in a conference room. I should tell you, my job is catching little cheats that think they're clever. I find the extra zero hiding in a snowstorm of zeros. I track the rogue subscription no one remembers authorizing. So when the credit card statement showed a cluster of charges in a city he'd said he only connected through, Reykjavik of all poetic places, I circled them with a pen and left the paper on the counter like bait. He didn't bite. He said, "Airport food is a racket," and kissed my forehead with a mouth that tasted like a very reasonable lie. Then there were the photos. Not scandalous. Worse. Cropped cityscapes on his phone, each one edited with the same calm filter, a blue that made everything look like it had exhaled. A bridge in Porto, a museum lobby in Vienna, a cafe awning in Kyoto with the corner of a hand just visible where the crop got careful. "You're getting artsy," I said, and he laughed like a man who didn't notice his own reflection was missing from his pictures. He was kinder than usual, which is either a sign of growth or a smoke detector. He folded laundry. He asked about my mother's knee. He made a big show of counting the days until our anniversary, writing numbers on the chalkboard by the pantry and wiping them off one by one, a calendar shedding its skin. 17 to go, he'd say, pen smudged on his finger, and I would feel loved and then suspicious for feeling suspicious. One night I came home from a long day of convincing a client that oops is not a legal defense, and I found him on the couch smiling at his phone like a teenager who just discovered the concept of being seen. I stood in the doorway and practiced all the ways I could say "who is she" without auditioning for a melodrama. The sentence I chose was, "new meme." He looked up fast, guilty people don't always look slow, and said, "just the travel agent." Who smiles at a travel agent like that? I asked my face not to answer. Here's how the dam broke, a cancelled flight that wasn't cancelled. He texted me from the airport, "Stuck overnight, I'll book a hotel," and I, being a woman who can find a number like a bloodhound, checked the airline. His flight was delayed, yes, but still leaving. I took a breath that made the room smaller and cold. "Your spouse is on this flight," the agent said, polite and oblivious. "He checked in an hour ago." I thanked her and sat with the phone in my lap like it was heavy enough to require paperwork. He came home 2 days later tanned with a new freckle on the top of his ear, the kind that only exists in cities you stand around in for no good reason. He set a box of macarons on the table. He kissed me soft. "Long," he said. "I missed you." "Me too," I said, which was true, and also, how was the airport floor? He didn't flinch. He picked up a macaron and said, "Cold." Some people are so brave with pretend. I didn't accuse him then. I made a spreadsheet. "It's fine, shame me in your mind if you must." I listed the trips he'd taken in the last 6 months. I cross-referenced charges. I highlighted restaurants with 2 dinners and 1 diner. I made a column labeled story and another labeled data, and the conditional formatting turned their contradictions a gentle, humiliating pink. I carried my little treason to bed and slept next to a man I loved in a house I chose and dreamed of the Reykjavik charges tapping their feet, impatient for me to grow up. The confrontation was not cinematic. I did not throw the macarons. I did not call my best friend and whisper from a bathroom. I brewed tea. I said, "I'm worried," the way a doctor says, "Tell me about the pain." He sat across from me and turned his mug handle to the left like he always does and said, "About what?" "About how your trips don't match your calendar," I said, and slid the spreadsheet forward. I wish I could tell you he denied it in a way that made me laugh. He did not deny. His face did a thing, fell and rearranged, like a building realizing it had been built on a sinkhole. He gripped the edge of the table, not defensively, like a person bracing for weather. Her name is Maren, he said. She lives in Copenhagen. There are sentences that split your life into before and the entirely different after. That one put a polite ribbon between my ribs and pulled slow. How long, I asked, the way you ask about a fever. Since February, he said. Months. An entire season. While I was calculating cash flows and flossing and believing time behaves. Why, I said, not because I wanted poetry but because numbers add and this did not. He swallowed. He looked at the fridge like it might loan him an answer. I met her on a flight, he said, and if you've ever wanted to slap a noun, you understand my silence here. We sat next to each other. We talked about nothing for 6 hours and none of it felt stupid. After, we kept talking. Kept, I said, because it's the verb that sinks people. Kept is a private agreement. Kept is 2 hands cupped around a match. He kept going, maybe because confession is momentum, maybe because the truth had its own itinerary. We didn't mean to meet in person. It was just texts. Then I was in Amsterdam and she was visiting a friend in Hamburg and I took a train. He pressed his lips together like he wanted to say the sentence and realized words don't come with receipts. I asked the next clinically, did you sleep with her? He shook his head once. No, then smaller, we kissed. Twice. I wanted more. I also wanted to come home and not be the man who did it. He made a helpless sound. I hate all of this. People always tell you how rage will feel. No one tells you how arithmetic will. I felt my brain do math, his dates, my dates, the time he sent a photo of a church ceiling in Antwerp, and I thought, oh, his finally noticing detail. The way his suitcase had learned happiness. The way my chest had learned to be a filed cabinet. Why didn't you just leave? I asked, quieter than I meant, because the good question shouldn't need to yell. I didn't want to leave you, he said, and it sounded like a fact, not a rescue. I wanted a version of me who didn't bore himself. With you I'm the whole person, bills and dentist and the way I leave tea bags in the sink. With her I am this interesting traveler. He shook his head at himself. It's pathetic. It's human, I said, and I surprised both of us. It's also unacceptable. He nodded quickly. Yes. Yes. He looked like a man who'd been allowed to keep breathing. I'll stop. I'll block her. He gestured at the air like there was a lever he could pull to disappear a woman in another country. No, I said, and his eyes widened because he'd expected that to be the part one wanted. You don't get to make this a gesture and call it growth. You're going to tell me everything. Then we're going to decide what ending doesn't insult the beginning. So he told me. About the first flight where he made a joke about the safety card and she responded with a worse one and he felt less alone 7 miles up. About the February where we got snowed in and he watched me build a blanket fort with lamps and he thought I love her and then thought I'm disappearing. About the messages that started as did you land okay and turned into what does your neighborhood smell like in the morning. About the way she said the word bridge like it was a personality. When he ran out of words the apartment felt too big. The tea had gone cold. Our kitchen table had done more diplomacy than anyone asked it to. He looked at me like a person who would applaud if I chose to scream. I did not scream. I said, here are my terms if you want a chance to fix the thing you broke that I helped you hold. He nodded, fast then slower, as if yes had to be rehearsed. I said them like steps on a map. 1. You write her. Not a poem, not a veil. A sentence that says you won't be in contact for at least 6 months and that you are choosing your marriage. I will read it before you send it. You do not get to make me a ghost in a story you wrap in romance. 2. A full audit. You give me the travel. The hotel names. The dinners. Not because I need to punish you, but because ambiguity is a weed and I intend to mow. 3. Therapy together and separate. And we don't make it a courtroom. We make it a lab. The hypothesis can be we're idiots. I'm okay with that. 4. Transparency without theater. Face-up phone, shared itineraries. Not forever. For as long as it takes my nervous system to believe we live in the same house again. He agreed. Not performatively, no hand to heart, no vow. He wrote the message plain. I read it and nodded. He pressed send and we waited. Waiting is its own country. After an hour she replied, I understand. I won't write again. Be good to her. She's the person you told me about when you were bragging without knowing. I did not expect to cry at a text from a stranger who kissed my husband twice. I did. They were not cinematic tears. They were accounting tears, small, efficient, hopeful that the numbers would eventually line up. The audit was awful and necessary. Dates, dinners, a train schedule highlighted in a color I will never use again. He told me about the second kiss in a park where the statues looked like they were thinking about leaving. He told me about the time he almost bought a sweater because she said it would look like a poem on him and then didn't because he remembered I hate turtlenecks. I listened. I wrote some of it down and then I burned that page in the sink like a teenager. It didn't fix anything. It named it. Naming is oxygen. Secrets suffocate even their keepers. Therapy was beige furniture and a woman named Asha who looked at us like she'd seen more elaborate versions of this fire and had water in different sizes. We talked about novelty and grief and how marriages become airports if you let them, everyone coming and going, no one staying to admire the ceiling. We said the Instagrammable things, that sometimes love is interest and sometimes it's inventory. That we had mistaken running smoothly for, well, that he had built a small glowing life abroad because the one at home had gotten quiet and I, being good at quiet, hadn't noticed silence turning into absence. We rebuilt tiny. Morning coffees at the table, not phones. A calendar where work trips went in with the name of the human who invited them. A list on the fridge called Here where we wrote down things we wanted to do in our own city. Bakery we always pass without going in. Bridge we've never walked at sunset, movie theater that plays old films on Thursdays where the popcorn tastes like custody of joy. It felt corny. It felt necessary. It is not tidy. I won't lie to you the way I wished he hadn't lied to me. Sometimes I still wake at 2 a.m. certain that Europe is happening without me. Sometimes he catches me staring at his suitcase like it grew teeth. When that happens he comes over and opens it and says, look, socks, boredom, paperwork, and we laugh because we have learned how to put boring on purpose into a room that used to be exciting by accident. 6 weeks after the message, a postcard arrived from Denmark with no return address, just a watercolor of a harbor and 3 words, be kind both. I showed it to Asha in therapy. She said, sometimes the universe signs off. We didn't keep the card on the fridge. We didn't burn it. We put it in a drawer with the warranties for appliances we hope never break but know someday will. On our anniversary we didn't go anywhere. He cooked. I set the table like the flatware could make a case for us. We ate slowly. He told me a story about a kid on his flight who clapped at landing and how the whole plane followed like it was a church. I told him about uncovering a 10-year-old embezzlement pattern that hinged on 2 pennies at a time. We listened to each other as if the room were a new city. After dinner we walked to the bridge that sees more proposals than arguments, and we argued briefly about whether swans are mean they are and then held hands like people who remember how they started. Do I forgive him? This is the part of the story where you want a verdict. Forensic accountant says yes, no, ledger closed. Here's the best I have, forgiveness for me is accrual, not a single entry. Every day he chooses ordinary, a small credit posts to the account. Every honest itinerary, every photo with both of us in it, every time he says I felt lonely before booking a ticket, every time I say I'm scared before sharpening my sarcasm, those add up. Someday we may have enough to pay down the kind of night that makes a person take a train for a kiss in a city where the sky takes its time. If you're there, your kitchen too bright, your heart doing math it didn't sign up for, this is me, a woman who thought she could out-audit fate, telling you ask for the numbers before they vanish. Do not accept I barely know her as a spreadsheet title. Define your terms. Set your map. Require daylight. Demand a plain sentence. Give yourself a lab coat and permission to experiment with boundaries that look unsexy because safety often does. And if he chooses you, make sure he learns to choose here, not just not there. Last week he had to fly to Stockholm. He sent me his itinerary of his own accord with the hotel and the meeting agenda and a ridiculous selfie at the gate where he looked like a man whose choices had stopped pretending not to be choices. Bring me back a magnet, I texted. Bring me back you, I didn't because I didn't have to. He returned with a magnet shaped like a moose wearing a scarf and a story about a woman on the plane who cried quietly into her sleeve and how he offered her a tissue without asking for her story. He slept like a man who had nothing to rehearse. In the morning we made pancakes and he drew a heart on the chalkboard instead of a countdown, and neither of us wiped it away. We left for work with dishes in the sink and the door locked behind us, and a life that, God help us, miracle that it is, continues here in the same time zone where we can see each other and say out loud before our flights of fancy taxi to the runway, stay.